All right, folks, let me save you a little time. I watched all of the Sunday morning news shows, which obviously you can see that's Chris Wallace, Fox News. I watched Meet the Press. I watched Face the Nation, John Wilkerson. I watched This Week with George Stephanopoulos. He was out. There was a replacement for him, which at the end of that particular show, he gave a very apropos pronouncement regarding Donald Trump and his attack on the media, calling them the enemy of the people. I also watched the CNN morning show, State of the Union. Out of all of those shows, I have to admit this, the best one that I saw was this particular one with Chris Wallace. Reince Priebus made the rounds on Meet the Press, Face the Nation. He didn't show up on George Stephanopoulos' show, but he did show up on Chris Wallace's show. And other than Chris Wallace, I think John Wilkerson basically was the strongest person as far as pushing back against Reince Priebus. But Chris Wallace, without a doubt, was the best in dealing with him. And I gotta say this, I don't really like Fox, but I do enjoy watching Chris Wallace Sunday morning, even though I may not agree with the takes that they have. At least he asks questions and does follow-ups, and he basically doesn't cut anybody any slack. He may not be super strong out there against everyone, but you can pretty much tell that he's going to ask a question of his guest that are going to be asked by people who absolutely don't agree with the philosophies of the guest. Here's the segment that Chris did with Reince Priebus. Now, just so that you know, if you want to watch the other ones, fine, go ahead. All it was, especially the previous segments, were Priebus basically pushing back and getting into minor, you can't call them altercations, minor disagreements with the other various hosts, and them getting a little stronger with him than they normally do. Now, Chris's interview drew a lot of, I guess, acclaim because of the fact that he did push back. Now, really quickly, some of the other guys that showed up, basically Rand Paul, and I liked him initially when he first started to run, but Rand Paul's turned into a joke. Rush Limbaugh, if you know anything about Rush Limbaugh, he basically was Rush Limbaugh, with his conspiracy theories, etc. You got Devin Nunes, he's a Republican congressman, and he thinks it's more important to investigate the leaks than to investigate the Russian involvement in our election system, which in my mind is a joke. Elijah Cummings was on, and he was fairly bland. He basically just commented on his involvement as far as Trump making statements that absolutely weren't true. Now, you had former General Harwood, who was Trump's pick to replace Flynn. And Harwood at the and I do mean at the last second, Harwood canceled his appearance on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Now, I don't know why the guy canceled, other than him thinking he just didn't want to get involved in the political mess. So, now, with that being said, here's Chris Wallace.
He made his case this week in an extraordinary news conference, and then yesterday afternoon in Florida in a campaign-style rally.
We are here today to speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
And that's a lie, because damn near everything that comes out of his mouth is a lie these days.
I hear your demands, I hear your voices, and I promise you I will deliver. I promise that.
Joining us now from Mr. Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Palm Beach is White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. Reince, I want to start with President Trump's tweet on Friday afternoon. This is what he wrote. The fake news media, failing New York Times, NBC News, ABC, CBS, CNN, is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people. Reince, the president believes that a free and independent press is a threat to the country?
No, I think for the most part, and I understand where he's coming from, is that there are certain things that are happening in the news that just aren't honest. And we're not talking about everyone, Chris. We're not talking about all news. But we're talking about something that I guess he's termed as fake news. Let me give you an example. First of all, the New York Times last week put out an article with no direct sources that said that the Trump campaign had constant contacts with Russian spies. Basically, you know, some treasonous type accusations. We have now all kinds of people looking into this. I can assure you, and I've been approved to say this, that the top levels of the intelligence community have assured me that that story is not only inaccurate, but it's grossly overstated, and it was wrong, and there's nothing to it. And so if I can say that to the American people, then what is it?
Okay, so number one, that's a lie. Okay, and if we don't have another name, okay, and I know that there are other names out there. We know for a fact, and it's been confirmed by the FBI, that Mr. Flynn had contact with Russian spies before Donald Trump was elected. So in my mind, that obviously is Donald Trump's campaign people having contact with Russian spies. So that's one. Now you got what's that guy's name? Stone, who, quote unquote, had a back channel, that's what his words, contact with the WikiLeaks people, okay, and Julian Assange. Julian Assange got his information, his email files from the Russians. So yes, Mr. Stone did not have direct voice-to-voice or face-to-face contact with the Russians, but he had indirect communication with them. And that's one of the reasons why he quit. Now, we still don't know what's going down with Paul Manafort, okay? He quit, and when the allegations were made against him, he was, let's call it strategic, by making a simple, he denies the allegations and kept his mouth shut about anything and everything else, whereas Stone basically is a conspiracy theorist nut, okay, who thinks that LBJ had JFK assassinated, you know, crap like that. And he can't help himself. He will show up on any TV show, radio interview, whatever, just promoting his bullshit, crazy-ass theories. He's another InfoWars guy, as far as I'm concerned. But that being said, let's continue.
Say about the story. The next day, Chris, the Wall Street Journal puts out a story that says that they have anonymous sources that say that the intelligence community is purposely cutting out material from President Trump's briefing materials that he gets every day. That then proved to be untrue. All the agencies put out a statement saying it was totally inaccurate. Then we get
listen, I get that you don't like this stuff. I get the fact that you don't like, Chris? I get the fact that you don't like some stories. First of all, you made some news there at the top, and I want to follow up on that. You say, because you've said before you weren't part of the campaign, so you couldn't speak to that. You say that the intelligence community says that there were no contacts between anyone in the Trump campaign, any associate of Mr. Trump, and anybody involved as a Russian agent as to the campaign and collusion in the campaign with Russia. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they told me, yeah, absolutely. They have made it very clear that story in the New York Times is complete garbage. And quite frankly, they use different words than that, okay?
Who was it?
See, and I believe the guy's lying because we all know that Michael Flynn was in contact with the Russians before then. I mean, hell, the guy was receiving payments for making speech in behalf of RT, which is the Russian official TV station. So for him to say that bullshit, you know, it's just a straight out lie, and he's, I guess, not expecting people to think about that kind of stuff.
And then when I read back,
who was it?
I'm not going to tell you.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute, Reince. You're just complained about unnamed sources. You're using an unnamed source.
Well, because I didn't ask for approval to use their name, but I will tell you this. When I say top-level people, I mean top-level people, okay?
So no collusion whatsoever between anybody involved with Trump and anybody involved with Russia in the 2016 campaign?
No. And if you look at Devin Nunes's comments in the actual paper on the
Chairman of the House
Chris,
Intelligence Committee.
He was briefed by the FBI, and what did he do? He turned around and went on the record and said that this story is complete garbage.
Okay, but here's the problem.
Here we are.
All right, no, here's the problem. Reince is citing unnamed sources, okay, and claiming holier than thou. But then when the New York Times and the Washington Post, they cite unnamed sources, he wants them to reveal their sources, okay, but he is unwilling to reveal his. So that's, you know, you can't have it both ways. Either everybody ponies up as far as their sources are concerned and you first, or you can't denigrate them for citing unnamed sources. Can't, you know, other than that, you know, you're full of shit.
Reince, wait a minute. Here's the problem. I don't have any problem with you complaining about an individual story. We sometimes get it wrong. You guys sometimes get it wrong. I don't have any problem with you complaining about bias, but you went a lot further than that, or the president went a lot further than that. He said that the fake media, not certain stories, the fake media are an enemy to the country. We don't have a state-run media in this country. That's what they have in dictatorships.
Okay, listen, Chris, it's not just two stories. Then it's followed up by 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of other cable stations, not necessarily Fox, that all day long on every chyron, every 7 minutes are talking about Russian spies, talking about the intelligence community, talking about how me and Steve Bannon don't like each other and what's Kellyanne doing. All this just total garbage, unsourced stuff. Listen, there's nothing wrong with background. Reporters need background information. We need to communicate with reporters and give reporters context. All I'm saying, though, is if you're going to come out with this, if you're going to come out with a story that says Russian spies are talking to your campaign, my God. I mean, you actually, I think you should, in some cases, or in most cases, actually have a named source. Look what we've done.
Okay, and if that's in fact the case, when your boss came out with all those unnamed sources regarding Barack Obama not being a U.S. citizen, not attending Harvard, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we still want to know all the sources that your boss used. And he finally, you know, at the tail end of everything, finally admitted that he was full of shit. So, you know, I rest my case. Unnamed sources.
Repeal TPP. We have signed a coal bill to save the coal industry. We named...
That's bullshit. They didn't sign a bill to save the coal industry. What they did is they reduced regulations which will make the coal industry in, heavy accent on the in, states like West Virginia, okay, and potentially Pennsylvania, but more so in the state of West Virginia, where the price of coal is $31, I'm sorry, the price of coal is $51 a ton. And for them to dig that coal out at $51 a ton, you can go to Montana and get not the same quality coal. I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke up your ass on that one. but a slightly, and I do mean slightly, lesser energy producing coal for $11 a ton. You tell me, $51 versus $11. Even if you have to use twice as much coal to get the same amount of energy, you're only spending an extra 11 bucks. So for 22 bucks versus 51 bucks, you're saving $29 by getting your coal from Montana. Donald Trump just blew smoke up those West Virginia miners' asses, called it sunshine, and they put on sunglasses.
Gorsuch. We put an executive order in to deregulate the federal government.
All of that.
There's so
we had
many
the Neil
things I
Gorsuch.
can talk
Wait
about.
a minute. We and all of the other cable channels had covered live the announcement of Neil Gorsuch.
Right.
Covered live a lot of these other events. Covered live for an hour and 15 minutes.
Hiring
the president's news conference. Here's the problem: when the president says that when the
See now Reince is going to try to overtalk Chris, and Chris is not going to let him get away with it. But basically, Reince is trying to say, "Oh, you're not covering all the good stuff we did." I gotta tell you, okay, that Fox covers everything. MSNBC is all over this. CNN is all over this. You know, they break in for live coverage on damn near everything that this guy does. So for Reince Priebus to sit up there and try to tell us that the president is not getting the coverage on all the quote-unquote good stuff that he's doing, that's just a flat-out lie.
Says that we're the enemy of the American people. It makes it sound like if you're going against him, you're going against the country.
Here's the problem, Chris. The problem is that you're right. Some of these things were covered, but you...
No, all of those things were covered. Every time this asshole signed something, whether it was an executive order or a presidential memorandum or him taking a meeting with the various unions or various CEOs or quote-unquote what he called black leaders were basically just black supporters of his. Every time he took a meeting and there was a photo op, everybody and their brother was covering it. And Reince is doing what all good bullshitters do. He's basically trying to define what subject is actually being discussed instead of answering the questions that are put to him. And he's going to continue to do that throughout this particular interview, and Chris is going to keep pulling him back.
You get about 10% coverage on the fact you get a very successful meeting with Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of the UK, the Prime Minister of Canada.
We covered all of those news conferences live. Everybody did.
Right, sure. Yeah, for about, yeah, right. But then...
See, he was getting ready to lie. He was getting ready to lie right there. He was getting ready to say, yeah, for about 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever your short-term period of time was, and he caught himself because he knew he was getting ready to lie, because everybody covered those meetings that they were able to actually cover, and obviously the public press conferences that they gave. Everybody covered every second of those live, and then they discussed everything that was said for like hours and hours afterwards. So again, he's full of shit.
As soon as it was over, the next 20 hours is all about Russian spies.
But you don't get to tell us what to do, right?
Nothing's happening.
You don't get to tell us what to do any more than Barack Obama did. Barack Obama whined about Fox News all the time, but I gotta say, he never said that we were an enemy of the people.
Let me tell you something. He said a lot of things about Fox News, Chris. I think you ought to go check the tape.
Yeah, but he never did say that Fox News was an enemy of the people. Yeah, and he did say a lot of stuff, okay? That is absolutely true. But that comment that Trump made was probably worthy of being mouthed by Vladimir Putin.
Blamed you for a lot of things, and I'm surprised as someone from Fox that you'd forget all the shots that he took.
No, he took the shots, and we didn't like him. And frankly, we don't like this either, because you know, but he never went as far as President Trump has, and that's what's concerning, because it seems like he crosses a line when he talks about that we're an enemy of the people. That is concerning.
I think you should be concerned. I think you should be concerned about mainstream news outlets that are acting like, you know, Washington Daily gossip magazines instead of the way it used to be, where you'd get a few sources on the record. Yeah, you'll need some background, and maybe, yes, you'll need some anonymous sources, but to accuse an organization of being in constant contact with Russian spies is outrageous. And every day it's something different. It's some other source that we are doing every single day.
I need to ask you another question about Russia, which you'll be delighted to answer. In his news conference this week, President Trump defended former National Security Advisor, now former, retired General Michael Flynn, in his phone call with the Russian ambassador. Here's the president.
Mike was doing his job. He was calling countries and his counterparts. So it certainly would have been okay with me if he did it. I would have directed him to do it if I thought he wasn't doing it.
I want to be precise here. The president doesn't think there's anything wrong with his pick, he wasn't then in office, for National Security Advisor calling the Russian ambassador to talk about, we're going to review and perhaps lift sanctions precisely on the day that President Obama imposed those sanctions because Russia had interfered in the U.S. election. He doesn't think there's anything wrong with that?
Well, I don't think there's anything, our legal department looked at this too, I don't think there's anything wrong with the subject of sanctions or new sanctions coming up. I don't think that that in and of itself is wrong, and I think that's what the president is saying.
I'm talking specifically about this phone call at this time. You've got President Obama, who is so outraged.
I don't know why you're so... because... I mean, it's fine that you're so going bananas here, Chris. Look,
I'm not going bananas. I'm asking you about the fact that it seems odd that the President of the United States, then Barack Obama, imposes sanctions because he says that Russia had interfered with, undermined our election, and you've got Mike Flynn calling the Russian ambassador and saying, well, don't worry about it, we'll review the sanctions. And you don't think there's anything wrong with that?
Well, you don't know he said that. What the president is saying is that
he might not know, okay, but the FBI knows. They got the transcripts. So I swear, if they ever declassify those transcripts, this guy is going to look like a bigger horse's ass than he already looks like. And remember, these are the same guys that told us that Flynn had no contact or conversations with the Russians, and then told us that, yeah, there may have been conversations, but the sanctions weren't discussed. And they know goddamn well that the FBI has got this guy for lying because they actually have the voice transcripts.
If the subject of the new sanctions came up, that in and of itself is not a problem. I mean, you know, how does, when you have a national security advisor that's calling 30 different leaders a day, there are a lot of topics of the day that come up. What are these people supposed to do?
Well, why did the acting Attorney General, Sally Yates, warn the White House counsel, Don McGahn, and why was it called into a meeting and you were met with Bannon and the president? Why did all of that happen? Obviously there was something troubling in that conversation.
It happened because Sally Yates alerted and gave a heads up. It was later determined that there was no investigation ongoing. We looked at the matter. The legal department determined that there was nothing illegal that happened in the conversation, but then the issue turned to whether or not Michael Flynn was being honest and direct with the vice president, and ultimately the president determined that it was an unsustainable situation, and he fired, or he asked for the resignation of Mike Flynn. I mean,
Reince, let me ask
what happened.
Let me ask you about that timeline, if I might, because the acting Attorney General notified the White House on January 26 about discrepancies between what Flynn had told Vice President Pence about the call and what transcripts showed Flynn had actually said. But while the president and Steve Bannon and you all knew, the vice president didn't find out till he read it in the paper on February 9th. Question: why didn't you, as chief of staff, tell the vice president over the course of 14 days?
Well, look, here's what happened. Yates came in, gave a heads up to the White House counsel. White House counsel looked at the matter. The next day or the day after, the investigation was closed and no longer going on. Then the issue shifted to whether or not something was done that was wrong. The vice president was then looped in on the situation, and we talked to the vice president about whether or not Michael Flynn was being honest or not. The vice president knew that there was an FBI interview. And then ultimately we decided, after about 10 days, bringing the vice president in, that we decided that he wasn't being honest. That is the timeline. It happened very quickly, Chris.
But the vice president says he didn't know for 14 days that he had been misled by Michael Flynn.
No, the vice president knew that we were, what the vice president didn't know.
See, okay, when he starts stuttering and changing direction, that's when you know he was lying. The bottom line was Pence should have been brought in on the 26th, okay, and told what was going down. They decided not to bring him in for 2 weeks. In my opinion, they basically didn't give a shit about Pence, and they were hoping that this stuff wasn't going to be exposed. It was going to be exposed on the 10th. They told Pence on the 9th, and obviously that's the only difference between the 26th and the 9th, which led to the firing, obviously, of Michael Flynn. And to say anything else is just spinning your ass.
I believe, was that Sally Yates gave an initial heads up to Don McGahn. But once the next day came and that investigation was closed, Chris, that topic didn't come up again. This whole conversation shifted to whether or not Michael Flynn was honest with the vice president. He was then looped in on that conversation, and it was determined that he wasn't. That was it.
But they knew on the 26th, or the next day, let's say the investigation was closed the next day, they knew the next day that Michael Flynn had lied to the vice president. So the action should have been taken then if lying to the vice president was such a big deal.
Okay, one final question. And we'll have a better conversation next time, Reince. The president is now trying to find a new national security advisor. In fact, he's interviewing a number of people today. At least two candidates, Bob Harward and David Petraeus, have reportedly been passed over because they wanted more control over how the National Security Council operates. Question, is the president insisting that a political operative, Steve Bannon, play a major role in national security, which appears to be a concern for some of these candidates?
The answer to that question is yes. He and Flynn were boys, and Flynn basically signed off on Bannon coming in because they were supporting each other, and Bannon only at the very end finally acquiesced and agreed that Flynn had to go. Anything else basically is spin. And now with Bannon being on there, and I guess he's obviously got Trump's ear, Trump is not going to allow anybody to come in there to head up the NSC to be able to kick Bannon off and also kick off the assistant national security advisor, which is a woman, by the way.
Yeah, no, the answer to that is no. And the answer to the first part of the question is, number one, the issue with Admiral Harward never came up. And we haven't really gone down the road with General Petraeus. But as to the staffing at the NSA, the new NSA director can do whatever that he or she wants to do with the staffing at the NSA.
But when you said no, are you saying that Steve Bannon, the new NSA director, can say, I don't want Steve Bannon as a formal member of the National Security Council?
The president has said very clearly that the new NSA director will have total and complete say over the makeup of the NSC and all of the components of the NSC, and there is no demand made by President Trump on any candidate for NSA director at all. So
including getting Steve Bannon out, because it's very unusual to have a political operative in that role.
So those reports that you're citing, those are more fake news stories that are completely untrue.
Yeah, they're fake news stories until they become real news stories. So whoever Trump picks for that spot, if they're smart, obviously they want to get Steve Bannon out of there so that they can have a direct and unfettered ear of the president without having Bannon or even you getting, or even Kushner getting in front of them.
Never put demands on an incoming NSA director. The NSA director can do whatever he or she wants to do with the NSC and the makeup of the NSC, and the president has been very clear on that topic. And again, here we go, talking about more news articles that are not based on fact.
But you know what I did, Reince?
But our word doesn't matter.
I asked you about it, and that's how good reporters find out whether or not something's true.
Well, you're a good reporter, because you're a good reporter.
Reince, thank you. Thanks for your time today. Always good to talk with you, sir.
See, and that's the other problem. There are other good reporters out there that send emails and place phone calls to the White House, and they are never returned. The emails go unresponded to, and the phone calls aren't returned. And then later on, after the reporter writes the story, the White House turns around and says they were never consulted about the story. It's a brilliant strategy, but it's total bullshit. Anyway, this was the best interview pretty much of the day as far as a Sunday morning news host had with Reince Priebus. If you want to see another one that was, you know, as far as I was concerned, okay, check out Face the Nation with John Wilkerson. That interview was, you know, it had its moments.